Listen, books just are deeper than games.
Yeah, but like, can you name a book where you press A to jump and it's a lot of fun?
Come on!
A critical error is an error which the OS cannot reasonably ignore. Jake Steinberg is a streamer, writer, and certified yapper. Complimentary. Peter Hunt Szpytek is a YouTuber, journalist, and certified yapper. Derogatory. These are the things they cannot reasonably ignore.
Recently, a Reddit post claimed that Disco Elysium made somebody stop playing video games and start reading books. There was a kind of joy that they were not able to find in video games outside of Disco Elysium that they found was extremely prevalent in books. Online, when people reacted to this post, there was a lot of self-consciousness on behalf of the gamer. A lot of people feeling like, how could you almost represent this medium as artistically less than that of books? Peter, what do you think is going on here? Why is this post hitting people in a way that is inspiring such offension?
So I think there's a few things. I think let me talk about the most obvious one first, because I think it's the one that like we all sort of like jump to when thinking about this sort of conversation. And it's the idea that like, I think there is a certain amount of self-consciousness that comes with being someone who likes video games, because it is often a medium that I feel like is like looked down on as far like I feel like it's like seen as like kind of like lowbrow, and that I think is starting to, I kind of feel like that's a thing of the past a little bit, not entirely, but it is something that is kind of an older view of video games back when games were a little bit more of a niche hobby, whereas like now like everyone plays games, right? Like whether they're playing something on their phone or like whatever, like everyone plays games. Like it's pretty universal. However, I think that there is still this anxiety built up around people who play a lot of games that like other people are sort of like looking down on them a little bit. And so the idea that like someone played Disco Elysium and was like, honestly, this is like a different medium, and I jumped ship to this medium, to this other medium, books. I think just like instills a sense of anxiety about like, wait a second, are you trying to tell me that games are not as good as books? Do you know what I mean? Which is not what that person is saying. It's just not, right? But like, I think that there is just this like sort of built-in self-consciousness that I think a lot of people who play a lot of video games, myself included, to be entirely honest with you, have surrounding specifically something like reading. Does that make any sense?
Of course, I think there is a cultural and psychological backlash happening here, because this is not a debate about the quality of media. It's, I think, the response is grounded in like gamers feeling like their intelligence and their taste and what they kind of choose to invest their time in is being judged by somebody from a now vaulted position. Before we started recording, I said to you, there's kind of this famous quote, taste classifies and it classifies the classifier. And this is kind of an old quote, but basically it's this runaround way of saying that media preferences, what you choose to consume, the hobbies that you like, the things that you like, are part of your identity. And I think nowadays that is so true for people. That is like maybe more true than it's ever been.
Oh yeah.
You are a Disney adult. You know what I mean? You are somebody who likes Marvel movies. Even the term gamer, as if that is some kind of protected class. It's like so silly. It's just like somebody that plays games when, like you said, like most people play games.
Yeah.
So it is kind of this this funny thing where saying, I read books now can sound a lot like I have actually upgraded myself. I go to the gym now. I am somebody who now I have a girlfriend. It's like these are kind of the things that I think people are hearing when they hear I put down video games and I started reading books, right?
Yeah. And I think like I do to a certain extent understand the like kernel of that, right? Because I am someone that we talked about on this podcast. You are someone who reads a lot. I'm not someone who reads that much. And we talked about how this year I would like to kind of change that. Last year I read a book, which I know it sounds silly to say, but like I am proud of myself for like doing that, for like taking the time to like actually sit down and read a book, read something, you know? And so like, I do understand that, because I do wish I were someone who got got enjoyment out of reading, you know? But it's just not something that really like appeals to me that much. That said, I do think it's important, and it's something that I think most people would all agree is important. And so when you are someone who like knows something is important, but you don't do it, isn't there a certain level of like shame is, I think, too strong a word, but there's a certain level of like, I hope no one knows that I'm not reading. You know what I mean? And I think that when something like this happens, where someone says, I'm no longer doing this thing that you associate so much of your personality with, or whatever, and I'm instead doing this thing that you know you should be doing, I think there's a level of like, there's a reaction that comes with that.
Definitely. And I think it's worth looking at and talking about Disco Elysium specifically.
Yes.
And what about that game was maybe that acted as like a bridge for this person. And like, because I think anybody with even passing familiarity with Disco Elysium can say that it is behaving in a way that is different from most other video games, right?
Yeah, because it's a text-based, it's an RPG with a lot of text. Not text-based, but there is a lot of text in that game. And it is also a game that is concerned with its text. It is a game that is focused on deriving meaning from the way that it is written, from its characters who operate. I sometimes get frustrated when people talk about games and say like, oh, it's kind of like it's elevated because it's like a book. When it's like, yeah, it's like a book in that it has elements that books have, but like those sorts of elements are not exclusive to books. But what I'm saying here is that like it is something that I think there's a very easy connection between Disco Elysium and maybe classic literature. Or even contemporary literature and stuff like that, based on the way that it is presented.
Yeah, it's funny. There is kind of if you look at video games as they test competency, and a lot of the core competency that games test can be in reflexes, it can be in memory, it can be in like all of these different things, like understanding a 3D space. I think the core competency of Disco Elysium is reading.
Yes.
And it's this funny thing where there's this idea of the writerly text, and a writerly text is something that when you read it, the reader is no longer a consumer, but they are now a producer of meaning alongside the text. And, you know, I think it's so easy for us to maybe come up with all of these things where that is not true for, where it is kind of about witnessing one specific meaning and kind of getting to the end and seeing something all the way through. Whereas I do think language being the primary verb of play in Disco Elysium, the long passages of uninterrupted prose, the way that you play the video game is actually the way that one might interrogate a piece of literature. Like that is the game, right?
You largely engage with them in the same way. And I think it's different than like, you know, I think people might say like, oh, well, like, you know, Jake and Peter, what about stuff like visual novels?
Sure.
And I do agree, because it is, you know, the same way that you engage with a visual novel is almost the exact same with how you read a book. And it is that the primary function is reading, right? But the thing that I think is so alluring about something like Disco Elysium and works as such a good bridge between those mediums is the way that Disco Elysium is concerned with its prose and is invested in you deriving meaning from its language in a way that visual novels tend to not be. That's not to say all of them, right? But largely, I think there is a difference there. Does that make sense? You know what I mean?
Definitely. And I think this kind of gets into the heart of why I think I really, if I could be so transparent, wanted to discuss this on the Critical Error podcast, is because there is this concept that I kind of have been flirting with for a couple of months now that I do not entirely have figured out like how to properly express it for the listener. So I'm going to do my best to try here and hope that maybe people will understand the majority of what I'm trying to say. I think that there is a quality to any piece of art that I'm going to call preparedness.
Mm.
Okay, there are pieces of art that are maybe more prepared and less prepared for an exegetic reading, for an interrogation of what that art is doing. And I started thinking about this for not the first time, but I think the first time it really clocked to me as something I was interested in when I was playing Pokemon Legends ZA, a game that I like a lot.
It's a game that's basically literature, is what you're trying to say here. It's
That's
the
what I'm
same as
trying to
Disco
say.
Elysium. Yeah.
It's I think Pokemon Legends ZA probably inspired a lot of people to pick up books.
I think so too.
Yeah.
It inspired me to put down Pokemon Legends EA.
Jesus Christ. Oh
come on
God.
now.
Yeah, I find the preparedness of Pokemon Legends ZA to pretty much be as low as something can be.
Mm.
And I am not trying to say that it is like a embarrassing piece of art or that there's like nothing of value in that video game. But I do think if we are looking at the words on the page, the text, the prose, what it is doing, and then I go over to maybe something that the listener is more familiar with than maybe even you or I am, the world of like the YouTube video essay about these Pokemon games. And the way in which people will force meaning into the text. People will say, "Oh, the reason that this character says this, the reason that this sentence is in the text here is actually because to illustrate this entire world of meaning." And then I find that beyond that singular reference in the text, beyond some Easter egg, some random thing in the environment, the game is really not in conversation with many of the ideas that people on these platforms might want to have you believe that it is. Like, okay, you've got something to say about this.
Yeah. So, okay. The conversation of our game's art is dead and in the ground, and I will never have it. I will never have it. It's a stupid conversation because the answer is yes, right? The more interesting question: what games are good art, right? And I think something like Disco Elysium is a good example of good art because it is a game that is exactly what you're saying, can stand up to interrogation. It can be picked apart as a piece of art and discussed without having to write fan fiction about it. Does that kind of make sense?
That is exactly what I'm reaching for. Thank you. Yes.
Whereas something like Pokemon Legends EA, which I'm a little bit less familiar with because I just didn't play that much of it, but that is a game that for you to do a critical reading of it, to really interrogate it, you are going to have to make some leaps that are not on the like in the game. You know what I mean? I know we said that we're done talking about this, but like it's on the mind right now. Metroid Prime 4.
Prime 4.
Yes, is a game that I think is a bad piece of art because I think that in order to truly assess it and to truly like find its meaning, you have to do a lot of reaching and a lot of like filling in the gaps yourself, and not in a way that the game is like intentionally leading you to. I think of a game like Returnal is not a game that it's like narrative and themes and things like that are those aren't handed to you. It's placed out for you to sort of like put together. That's intentional, right? I think Metroid Prime 4 does not do that. And so to what you're trying to say, I think a lot of games just simply are not built to be interrogated as a piece of art, which is different from how a lot of other pieces of art across other mediums are. And I think like books, for example, tend to be a lot more willing to withstand that interrogation than games. I think there's a few reasons for that, but I want to hear what you think about that.
Yes. So I think that this idea of preparation and this idea of withstanding interrogation, like you just said, is such, when you love video games and video games are the primary kind of media that you interact with, this can feel insulting. This can
yes, exactly.
So this can feel like so confrontational. And I just really want to dig in on this idea of preparedness and what I am trying to say, because I think I can make this clear to the listener or the viewer. And I just want to talk about how like books and pieces of literature that have stood the test of time and are studied and are kind of written and rewritten about over and over again for like literally hundreds of years. I think that there is a degree to which books structurally are prepared for things like close reading, which, okay, I can close read a video game, right? Rereading without loss. Great art holds up to multiple viewings. And I wonder how many, if we're really being honest with ourselves, how many people feel that way about video games? How many times have you seen a video game written about where it's, I cannot say, I don't want to spoil something, so I can't talk about this game. And almost as if once you know that spoiler, it is not as valuable as an experience to go through the thing again. Ambiguity without resolution. I think there's a culture around video games that it's about finding the answers. It's about understanding it better than anybody else, having a Wikipedia or lore-brained response to something where actually it's about this period. I think that there's something about books that they are more structurally prepared for people to be comfortable with an ambiguity around them. Whereas with video games, there's something pushing people towards one answer. And contradiction. That is something that I think I find in games maybe the least. The allowance for competing understandings of what a text is doing while having both of those understandings still be seen as valid. Not a kind of like a correct answer. How does that? Yeah.
Look, that last thing is such a big thing. Because as someone who has been working in the YouTube space for the last year now, having a dissenting opinion on a game, the vast majority of the people who like find your dissenting opinion are not going to say like, oh, this is a really interesting perspective. I disagree, but you know what I mean? Like most people are hitting you with just like, no, wrong, bad. And it's frustrating because it's like, no, I'm trying to have that conversation. I'm trying to examine, I'm trying to hold games up to the standard that people want them to pretend that they can be held to. You know, it's this idea of like, if you are the type of person who is maybe insecure about the idea of reading games, of like books being like a higher brow medium than games, then we should be able to assess games as pieces of art, as works of art in the same way that we can assess books. And if we can't do that, then maybe it's correct. I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying that like if we are not able to actually discover what games are actually able to be held to scrutiny and investigated, then I think it's a problem. Yeah, it's I understand the insecurity about it because like I said, I'm someone who doesn't read a lot and I wish I did. However, I think that in order to confidently look at games as something that can be held up to other mediums that are largely like culturally like accepted as, oh, these are for smart people. I think that we need to actually do that work and actually then be able to say, you know what, is Pokemon Legends ZA, and I'm not saying it's a bad game, but I am saying like, is that game going to be something that is a part of the gaming canon for all of time, or is it more akin to whatever is big on Book Talk right now? Something that's fun. It's a good thing to check out if you're trying to keep up with what's going on in the year. But, you know, in 10 years, I don't know if we're going to be talking about, I don't know what is big on a Book Talk, but you know.
Well, and I think you're making a relevant point here because I think a lot of people maybe misunderstand the argument at play to say that by virtue of something being a book, it is simply more artful than a video game.
Correct, which is not true.
No. Especially
because in the same way, if I may, in the same way that we look, like you would never say like, are books art? Fucking obviously. But are all books good art? No, absolutely not. No, of course not.
And there's kind of a funny thing happening here, right? Because I think it's maybe clear to anybody listening that if you had to say which artistic medium is more driven by capitalism, books or games, I think we can all agree that maybe games are more invested in making money.
Jake, no.
And maybe better at making money than books. I don't want to see that breakdown of how much money books make versus how much money games make. I bet you it's a bloodbath.
But it's also this thing, though, too, where I think a very easy pushback on this conversation from us would be like, well, critical error boys, you don't understand. You simply don't understand. A single author can write a book, but like even the concept of a solo dev doesn't really exist for the most part, right? In terms of like getting a game out the door. Right. So it's this idea of like, yeah, well, of course a book can stand up to a criticism and interrogation better than a game can. Because if you wrote a book and you showed it to someone and they said, yeah, this kind of doesn't really work, you as the author could be like, you know what? Yeah, let me fix that myself right now. And like sit on your little computer, your typewriter, I don't know how people write books, and fix it, right? Whereas it's like, you play a game and you're like, hey, this sequence like kind of doesn't gel with the rest of this thing, and I just don't know how this works, whatever. Now you're getting like 90 people involved to try and fix a thing that like ultimately I think most people who play games don't really care about.
Well, and even that incredibly salient point aside, I think if you're comparing the pros of video games to the pros of books, games should almost always lose, because if they didn't, bad for books, I would say.
Yeah, well, I would
say
games are a mechanically driven medium, right? And books are a word driven medium, like a literature driven medium. So it makes sense that that's the focus of a book, right?
I don't think anybody should argue that the most of the meaning of any video game lives in its prose. And I think that's maybe what makes Disco Elysium different.
Yes, agreed.
So part of this is something you and I bemoan a lot, is the expression, games are a young medium.
Yeah.
We don't like that expression.
They're
around
almost
these parts.
50 years old. I mean, I'm not saying that like comparatively, yes, but like, you know.
But it's also, I feel that the way that phrase is deployed is almost this apologia for games not being artful, which we actually know that video games are quite artful,
right?
And probably always have been. And I think the reason that what's happening here, the maybe dissonance between me and somebody who might use that excuse, is that I would alter it just slightly. I would not say that games are young. I would say that games criticism is young. I would say
yes, 100%.
That our ability to judge, clearly write about, and parse the meaning of video games is young. I would turn it back onto my peers, and I would say that maybe our ability to evaluate, to construct even a critical vocabulary for talking about what games do, is so behind and amateurish. I would even say that we don't have a critical vocabulary when talking about video games.
No, I would agree. And here's the thing. I think with all of this, like, I hope that our audience is like understanding that we are not saying these things are black and white, right? And like the idea of like, hey, games criticism is new, and you could point to a billion people who have been doing it. But I'm talking about like more in the mainstream space, right? And so many people look to video game reviews now, and I think one of the more than ever before, right? And I think one of the main pillars of our show is to look at a lot of those reviews and say, like, is this a review of a piece of art? And I think largely the answer is no. And the idea of jumping from Disco Elysium to books, I think there is a certain level of recognition of, hey, this is a piece of art, and I want to find other like not handcrafted, that's the wrong word, specifically crafted, intentionally crafted pieces of art that do similar things. I think we are largely wholly unequipped to evaluate games in this way based on the way that people who play games want to talk about them.
There is a media scholar who has written about games before, Espen Arseth, and he has this idea that I might not be representing this perfectly. This is kind of like highfalutin stuff even for me, but this categorization of video games as ergodic literature. And ergodic is it's from the Greek. Ergon is work, and the suffix is, I think, path. And the idea is that it's like to work along a path. And meaning, rather than being passively received, it's produced through effort. And it's not like trivial effort. So like in a book, do you need to do the effort of like turning a page, of like reading left to right? Like, yes. But non-trivial effort would be making choices, navigating structures, retrying, failing, backtracking, learning rules, learning systems. It's a structural effort, not just like a cognitive effort. And I think that already, if you start from there, there is a framework at play for a way in which you could critically talk about video games that, like you said, it's not that good games writing doesn't exist. We know that it does exist. We know that people produce it. But is there a standard for this kind of critical work? Has this been mainstreamed in a way where, in the way that people who study film criticism kind of have frameworks to situate themselves in, to kind of produce work that is coherent for an audience? Like, I think we straight up do not have that for video games.
Yeah, and I think there's a billion reasons for it. You know, I think there's a lot of reasons for it that I don't necessarily think we need to like dive into each one of those reasons now, because I think it's largely like uninteresting, right? Like we've talked about this before, about the fact that you can't be a games critic and have that be your full-time job. You know, you have to, if you're a games writer, you are writing news and guides and previews and reviews and interviews, right? And so like reviewing games is a small portion of your job, and it is given the same amount of like emphasis, at least in my experience writing about games for like websites, it is given the same amount of emphasis in terms of priority as doing news. In fact, guides are prioritized much more over reviews, because guides are usually what keep the lights on at a lot of these websites and things like that. And so I think because it's not like an individualized, specialized like part of games writing, I think that we cannot have like a better sense of games critique and stuff. You were saying, sorry.
No, I think that is true, but I do want to push back just a little bit, because I don't think the entire bulk of the responsibility of games criticism as an art form should befall the games media workforce. I think
correct. 100%.
Yeah. Like there are a lot of people who do this kind of stuff for like the love of the game. And I think the love of the game is, I mean, I would say you and I do this for love of the game.
Yeah.
And I think like there is a lack of curiosity oftentimes, and desire to investigate other mediums that I think you can see reflected in the backlash to the original Reddit post that we started this podcast talking about.
Yes.
And it is this idea that there is nothing to learn from these other places, that I do not have to better myself, better my critical viewpoint to be somebody who understands games. I can talk about video games because I have played a lot of video games. I can talk about video games because I like them a lot. I can talk about video games because I have a YouTube channel where I talk about them. And I think that is all fine. But as somebody interested in the art form that is criticism, and I don't think you need to be a member. I think you can work in games media and not be interested in that. I think you can work in games media and be extremely uninterested in that. But I do think that historically, when you look at other art forms, when they emerge, something that helps legitimize them in the mainstream is criticism, is the formation of criticism around those art forms. That's what helps the mainstream see them as legitimate. And if you want people to see video games as legitimate art, there is a responsibility that befalls you to investigate and to kind of play a role in the formation of serious and legitimate criticism that challenges you, the critic.
Yes.
That is confrontational to you. That makes it so you have to learn something. You have to appreciate a perspective that you otherwise did not. It cannot and should not come easy to you.
I also think this is like piggybacking off what you're saying. The idea, to go back to the Reddit post about like, I have been reading books now. Something I think a lot of games critics miss, and again, not all of them, but many I think miss, is the idea that like, hey, I don't think you should be a good games critic. I think you should be a good art critic. Yeah. And if you have a specialization in games, great. Like that's how I roll, right? Like I think like I have a degree in film criticism, but I think I specialize in games. But you should be looking outside of games as often as you can to just get more perspectives on stuff. It's funny, we were talking about this in our bonus episode for our Patreon community, patreon.com/criticalerror. We were talking about that this week about how H Bomber Guy's videos about like pathologic and stuff like that. But one of his videos that he made is about Dark Souls 2, and it's really interesting because Dark Souls 2 starts with these old women who are like weaving, and it's kind of weird because it's not something that you ever really see in the Dark Souls series before or after that. And he talks about how the Dark Souls wiki for these women is incredibly short because there's no information on them and there's no lore about them. But that's because they're from movies. They're from like Kurosawa films, who are these like weaver characters who are like basically like the fates from like Greek mythology, essentially. But he talks about this idea that like you wouldn't know that if you only played games. And to be a more a better viewer of games as an art form is you need to expand your horizons, right? I was watching I watched Nosferatu, the Robert Eggers one, this past weekend. And I was watching it and I was like thinking about like Victorian architecture and the idea of like the plague and all this sort of stuff. And then that got me thinking about Bloodborne a little bit. So I was like, oh, like that's a game with such a strong fascination in those sorts of ideas as well. And I wasn't doing any like work on it, but I was just like making some connections in my head, like thinking like, oh man, like the way it's portrayed in this movie kind of reminds me of this one thing, and it just sort of it meshes together well. And then through that, I think if I were to like make something about Bloodborne, that might be a piece of work that I return to think about what it's trying to do with that setting, with it, what it's trying to do with those ideas, in addition to what's going on in something like Bloodborne. You know what I mean?
100%. You're speaking to well-roundedness. Well-roundedness makes you a more informed critic. It also makes you a better and more informed human being in every aspect of life. It turns out I cannot imagine a less interesting perspective than that of just my perspective is that I play every single video game and I know them all. As I said that, I think it maybe sounded a little bit meaner than I intended it to. But I think what I mean by that is that I know that anybody who inhabits that perspective, that there is actually much more to that person than they are letting on.
Yeah.
And I think I am more interested in other aspects of that person than I am on somebody trying to cosplay as Wikipedia.
So here's the thing too. I think about like the idea of if someone played Disco Elysium and they were like, Peter, can you tell me other games that are like this?
Yes.
And you would have to talk to them and be like, well, what did you like about it? And they're like, I loved the text of it. I loved the way that it was blah, 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 right? You might have to say, no, dog, you got to check out books, because books informed the creation of this game. Do you know what I mean? So like, for example, you remember the game Venba? Did you play that game?
Yeah.
I love Venba. It's a little. It's like I don't know, like an hour 15, where it's kind of a visual novel / like little like cooking mini game about a family that comes from India and they move to Canada, and it's about like having a son, and do you raise that son to be Canadian? Do you raise them to be Indian? Like how does all that work? And if someone said like, Peter, what should I do to engage with something like Venba? If I want more Venba, what should I do? I might say, go to an Indian restaurant. Do you know what I mean? Like go experience it, because if what you liked about that was that it was a cultural experience where you got to learn about like a new thing that you didn't even know about, maybe go to a place like that. And that's not a video game, you know? And of course there's like games that you could definitely recommend that are like of a similar like ilk, right? But like go be multifaceted. go try something new that isn't just this one thing. And I think you're going to be, like you said, like well-roundedness. You'll be a more well-rounded person.
Yeah, it's funny. So many games, I think, kind of alluding back to the Pokemon comparison that I made earlier.
Yeah.
I think that there are so many people who play games that are interested in like really big ideas. There was in 2024 when Metaphor ReFantazio was like the thing that everybody was.
Good pull. Yes.
Yeah, that thing that like everybody was interested in. I found that there were maybe ideas in that game that people were like, "Oh, this is like the first piece of media I have found that is like really kind of like engaging with some of these higher-minded ideas that I'm actually really interested in hearing or reading about." And I think that kind of like what you're saying here, another bridge that's a step further than playing Metaphor ReFantazio would be to recommend somebody some books that I think that they might find revelatory on those same topics.
Metaphor is about a book. It's based on, what's the book? Do you know what I'm talking about?
It's not coming to me.
It's like classic something. Yeah.
It's not coming to me, but what the other one I was thinking too is I was like, man, maybe somebody listening to this podcast might want a book recommendation that is kind of like Disco Elysium, in which case
hit me with one.
Okay.
Someone who doesn't read that much.
Okay, so one of my favorite authors is Michael Chabon. He wrote one of my favorite books called Wonder Boys. But people are probably most familiar with him via the Adventures of Cavalier and Clay is kind of the famous one by him, I think. I think there's another famous one that is now dropping out of my brain that I'm not remembering. But
you got it? No, I got The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay.
People love that one. That one shows up in school a lot. But I would say his book, The Yiddish Policemen's Union, has a lot of connective tissue to play. Okay, I just like his prose. I will say I'm like a mark for anything this guy writes, even when I'm not interested in the subject matter. But I think that they're both interested in this issue of like how a person who you might describe as broken can think and exist within a broken political system, and how that person's language becomes this self-effacing tool for how to make sense of the world that they live in and the kind of like unfortunate circumstances that they have to exist in. So it's a book that I think is the protagonist is like extremely competent and observant, but also perpetually tired. And I think in Disco Elysium, you have this case that you're preoccupied with, but what you're really investigating is like your this character and your ideology, your self-loathing, and like your kind of dormant desires. And in both of these books, there's kind of like a crime at the center of them, which is, you know, the policemen's union. Can you imagine it's interested in crime? But it's less, the crime is not like the focus of the book. It's really just to situate this like consciousness amidst this thing that's happening at the same. So anyways, allegorical political fiction, really good book. Michael Chabon, highly recommend. But if you're going to pick up anything, Wonder Boys, dude.
Wonder Boys.
Oh my God. Good movie with Michael Douglas and Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire.
Oh, gotcha. I was like, there's 6 of them.
Yeah.
Here's something interesting too about hopping mediums as well. I find that like, because you like learned about books in school, come with me here. Because
oh my God, I love this. Please.
Because you did so much work about books in school. I think it's really easy to, for me at least, to like talk about the things that makes books unique, and to talk about the things that would make a good book a good piece of art, a good book, right? That's like imagery through like repetition and like all sorts of like the mechanics of a book, right? The way a story is told is the important thing, right? I think about we talked about one of your, I think in Street Fighter Girls 2, the piece that you wrote, where we were talking about like, what I really loved was the way that you used the details in a space to paint the scene. You know, you talk about, okay, the chair's at the desk, whatever, and this is on the bed. But then, like, you don't really describe the rest of the room because you don't need to, because you're painting a specific picture and the rest is filled in. You're using, like literary devices in that moment to make someone feel a thing. And I think for me personally, it's really easy to identify literary devices and stuff like that because we learned about them a lot in school. So then when you shift over to video games, you can still use some of those same literary devices, right? Or like, I think, of course, games get compared to like film a lot, right? You can use a lot of the like film language to talk about video games. But then you get to this point where you're like, well, how do I talk about the mechanics? How do I talk about the connection between what you're doing in the game and how it makes you feel? Or what is happening in the narrative versus what you're doing in the game and those sorts of things. That's when you start to get into like, oh, this is what makes games unique as an art form. And I think by identifying the things that make other art forms unique and easy, jumping to other art forms that I think we might have better language to discuss and we might have a history of discussing in our literal like lives, I think that's when you start to really dig into like, oh, this is the thing that we should be talking about with games.
Yeah, and that kind of thing calls back to that point I was making earlier about kind of the standard of criticism and like having a vocabulary and things like that. But also, I think you can like normalize this comparison so quickly by understanding that most books are one of three things: airport thrillers, young adult fantasy, or mass market romance. And these books are designed to be plot driven, stylistically transparent, and designed for the reader's momentum. And I think that people would agree that video games, I think, are designed for flow, clarity, and the reduction of friction. And so I hope people don't. There's this temptation, I think, to walk away from this conversation thinking that this is about elitism and being unfair to the medium of video games. But what I really appreciated about what you just said is that there is kind of this way in which people will talk about the meaning that is communicated in games through like the perceived quality of the dialogue, the coherence of the plot, and how obvious the character arcs are, which is like at a lower reading level is how you might talk about books. But to do that, you would have to ignore everything that the games are doing that are not prose, that are not how the meaning is constructed outside of like the text. And I do find that a lot of people in kind of like games criticism do kind of operate in that way. But that is why games are always going to lose to books because we're grading them on a scale that the books decided.
Yes. Oh gosh, this is like Jake, this is wrap it up. This is the final episode of Critical Error is what I'm getting at, because this is like just like the point. This is the point. The idea that like, okay, we can talk about games like they're movies. We can talk about games like they're books. But when we talk about books, we don't talk about them how they're movies. We talk about, you know what I mean? Like of course there's like shared elements. There's shared elements, of course. But like why not talk about the book?
Yeah,
talk
why not
about
talk
the
about
movie,
the book?
you know? And so developing that language to actually discuss games in this way, I think, is so important. And I also find there's this level of we've seen a lot of like Marvelification in film discussion, right? Where if a movie does not sort of like check the boxes that like the best Marvel movies check, then they are not good, right? It's always interesting. You see to what I would say like the average viewer. It's always interesting to see like a movie that has like a really high critic score and a really low audience score. And you watch the like, I don't know, like I said, I have a degree in film criticism. I watched a movie like that and I'll go like, yep, I know exactly why that happened, because it is a movie that is not necessarily trying to do all of the things that we have all sort of decided are what are in big blockbusters, but that doesn't mean it's not good. And I think that there is a threshold for how good or for how deep maybe something that needs to check all of those boxes can be. And so when we turn to video games, I'm not saying Pokemon Legends ZA isn't a fun game, but I am saying that if it has to be this, is there not a threshold for how good it can possibly be if it needs to make sure that all those things happen?
And I think that's extremely related to my Octopath Traveler piece about kind of the dissatisfaction of the narrative, not everybody not coming together at the end.
I
right?
want to
Like
read it. I
Avengers
want to read
Endgame.
it. I haven't had the time because I liked what you wrote, but you said that it's like way different on your blog, right?
Yes, the piece I read on the podcast for the listeners last week is now on my blog, jakesteinberg.substack.com, but it is highly edited, which I think is actually kind of fun because you get to see the benefits of the revision process, I think,
Gosh, that's great.
unfold right in front of you, and how I think I sharpened that piece into something. But also, you know, I kind of want to leave the listener with like a bit of a warning. And there is something that I think when people get excited to parse a video game for meaning, to perform kind of like a close reading of something happening in a game, and then I would say oftentimes maybe accidentally end up writing fan fiction, maybe getting a little bit too far away from the text. Participating in a little bit of that blue curtains discourse, if you are so familiar.
I
Yes, yes,
am.
yes. And I think that that can feel really fun and enlightening and like you're really engaging with the text on a higher level. But I do think, and I'm so sorry, maybe there's a bit of a teacher coming out in me right now. The best way to kind of hone your craft as a reader, to hone your critical eye, is to parse a book for meaning, is to read a book and take something that you know is prepared for the kind of interrogation you are interested in performing, rather than trying to force that interrogation onto something that is not prepared for you to engage with it in that way. I am not picking up the newest mass market romance book, which is awesome, and I suggest everyone read and will make your flight go by like that. But I am not performing my highest degree of my exegetic lens on that book because it is not prepared for that. So taking something that is and challenging yourself, confronting yourself to say, I am going to do this because it is going to be like a workout, like going to the gym, like working on a muscle that I have not yet begun to hone and work, will make you a more inspired video game player, will make you a more well-rounded person. It will make you be able to appreciate things that were previously invisible to you. I promise, I swear it, you will experience the ecstasy of discovery. This, I believe this with my whole heart, 10 toes down. I know how annoying it is. I know I hate when people weaponize this phrase, but god damn, read a book.
And here's the thing. The reason why I think books are a good place to start with this is because you already know how to do it because you went to school.
Yeah.
Jake, can I tell you about our lovely Critical Error Nation?
Yes.
Patreon.com/criticalerror. You will find, just hours and hours and hours of bonus content.
For real.
That we made just for you, the person listening to this podcast today. We had an unexpectedly big bonus episode.
Well, and last week we never even talked about our surprise.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We did 2 bonus episodes last week just for the hell of it. And we, it wasn't a whole thing. It was just like, hey, check it out. 2 bonus episodes for your listening pleasure. If you're interested in getting more of us, the bonus show, we unbutton a little bit, kind of talk a little bit more free flow, little less structure. You can find that again, patreon.com/criticalerror. Before we move on, though, I would like to give a very special thanks to the people in the Jake and Peter tier of the nation. People like Andrew Bolkar, Evan Ponce, Evan Snee, Mayro, and Robert Quesada. All of these people are at the highest tier, supporting us financially, which means the entire world to us. But Jake, those aren't the only people that we want to give direct shout-outs, is it?
Absolutely not. We've got to play the sound for the members of the Critical and Error Nation supporting us at the $10 and up tiers. Play the sound! Can you believe this support from the Jake and Peter tier members? Andrew Bolkar, Ansel Trait, Evan Ponce, Evan Snee, and Mayro. Thank you so much again for your support. And the Critical Error royalty members: Cole, Connor Truelove, Danny Disaster, Jacob Richter, James Pierre Reed, Jared Cousineau, Kale Chow, Sam Cedar, Sam Woods, and Shin. Thank you again. And we're back. All right, we end every episode of this podcast with a piece that we have written in advance. It's the kind of thing where, podcasts by their very nature are a little bit from the hip, a little bit improv, a little yes and free form. And I think preparation, doing your homework, thinking about something in advance is just an important thing for any critic to do and make a ritual and a practice of. So I, for one, am very glad that we have this at the end of each and every show. It means that we had to have thought about something before coming on to record here. And now Peter is going to, with your turn this week, share with the class what you thought about.
So I said this in our bonus pod. That I struggled this week a little bit. I've actually, to be entirely candid, I've been having I've been feeling a lot of burnout and a lot of creative sort of stagnation, which is frustrating when your job is to make stuff and be creative. And so I wrote a whole piece about Metroid Prime 4, and then I was like, this sucks. Like I've tried to write about the game a few times, and I think this is the final nail in the coffin where I'm like, I'm done. I can't do it. And so I scrapped it in favor of this, which I'm going to be excited to see where it goes in the future. Jake, it was only a matter of time. Please enjoy. I share a birthday with an artist. He died at 95. Every year we pass his death day. I wonder if he'll share mine. I'm petrified of growing older. But please don't tell Mom. It was hard enough to lose her brother. She shouldn't have to lose a son. I've had a year full of losses and shame. Now I stare at the wall in my room. Sneak out at night, cut your hair, start a fight. Now we're howling like dogs at the moon. Yeah, we're howling like dogs at the moon. Your mom keeps asking how I'm doing. I lie through my teeth. I just can't shake the feeling. She's disappointed in me. I wish you would understand me. Or I wish that you'd try. Either way, there's no difference. Count the broken street lights. I've had a year full of losses and shame. Now I stare at the wall in my room. Sneak out at night, cut your hair, start a fight. Now we're howling like dogs at the moon. Yeah, we're howling like dogs at the moon. Thank you.
Oh my God, what a privilege. Oh my God. Okay, so first off, I'm shocked how good it sounded on my end.
So I'm happy to hear that. I did do an iPhone or not my phone recording of this.
No,
I have no idea if it was going to come through or not. Okay, cool.
I think it was good actually. I was definitely like the second you reached for the guitar, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to do something. And then you started, and I was like, oh no, that's actually quite good.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
Yeah, no. So that was a great experience. So, wow, Peter, I feel like that should like cost people extra.
Well,
like,
here's the thing.
The YouTube video should have like a pop-up, and it's like, sorry, $3 if you want to hear the rest of this.
How about this? If you want to pay for it, patreon.com/.
Patreon.com. Yeah, you're right.
Oh I mean, here's the thing. I like I said, I've been struggling with some like my writing, as in like sitting down at my computer to write scripts and videos and like whatever. I've just like been hitting this block where like nothing has felt good. And I had a little bit of that song for the last few months, and then a few nights ago I sort of sat down and got a little bit more of it done, and I was like, oh, this is starting to shape up into something that I really like. And I was like, this is a show about writing and whatever. And I was like, we do, sometimes it's fiction, sometimes it's personal essays, sometimes it's like game reviews and whatever. And it's like, let me bring another aspect of writing to this that, it's not games criticism. It's not about games at all, but like there's a little something to that. You know what I mean?
Oh no, 100%. That was awesome. I'm thinking like, well, first off, you just said something that I tell my students all the time about how like writing is remembering and how you kind of like have something and you wait for you kind of like arrive on this idea when you are like ready to put this together. I don't know. There's something in here that I'm trying to say right now that is kind of like the antithesis of what AI achieves and how you like arrive at the answer immediately. And this is like part of the artistic process that I really appreciate. And I also think I got this Discord maybe or this question in our Discord maybe like a week or two ago where it was somebody being like, Jake, you do a lot of different artistic things. How do you like balance it all? And you kind of answered that right there where like sometimes, we are human beings and we have all these forces constantly enacting on us. And sometimes like the thing that you need to do is not the thing that you feel like you need to do.
Yes. Walk away.
Walk away and your like work will be better for it. I know I've been experiencing that a lot lately where there's like a lot of work that I like need to do. And I actually like ended up picking up like this like fiction stuff that I haven't worked on forever. And I'm like working on it and I'm like, oh God, this is like, it's like so much, it's like singing now that I like took a year off of it. And that's crazy. It's like magic, dude. It's, oh God.
I mean, so I haven't written music, like sat down to like write songs in like a year because we did our album and like I wrote a fuck ton for that. And then it was about recording it. And then it was about like getting it out the door. And I was like, I wrote the first little bit of that song, like I said, like 2 months ago, 3 months ago. And I was like, what am I doing? This song isn't going to see the light of day, if it ever does, for like 2 years, like minimum, right? And I was like, but that doesn't matter. Like, let me sit down, let me write, let me express, let me work on something. Because in the same way that like, hey, it's good to experience other bits of art and things like that to come back and like hone the craft of like video game criticism or like talking about games or experiencing games, whatever. Like, it is good to jump ship and try something else and say like, this helps my creative juices flow. And once they're flowing here, there is I think like symbiotic relationship between a lot of these things within ourselves. And it's like, okay, if I can get it flowing for this, maybe I can get it flowing for something else.
I think something I like about doing this podcast with you is that you and I are both people that take our like quote unquote craft like really seriously. And I don't mean that as like we're like I don't think we're like elitist about it, but I do think we think more about kind of the process and how we will arrive at doing the work than we do at just like, okay, now the thing I don't want to speak for you, but I think sometimes I'm like more proud of the work I do before the thing I produce comes out.
Dude, and you know what I mean? That nobody sees. I'm sure I've talked about this on a podcast at least once. Our drummer, his name's Trevor. He asked me, he was like, were these like the 11 songs you had for the album? And I was like, Trevor, I had like 30.
Yeah.
I had like 30 and they all sucked. And these songs are like pieced together of like the best bits from one little idea. And then, you make it work in this thing and this thing and this thing. And like, that's the stuff that like, that's the stuff I'm good at. Like that is the thing I think I'm really good at is putting it together in that kind of work. But it's so frustrating because it's just like, oh, so these were just 11 you had, right? Like, gosh, no, it was an unfathomable amount of like self-editing and work and like reflection and all that kind of stuff,
I think so much about similarly, there was a movie I was working on for like a major studio that had asked me to do a complete draft, which is like really unusual. And I was like so excited to do this. And there is a scene in this movie that I think probably is maybe still like the best thing I've ever written. And I remember, and unfortunately it's that has since been struck down and it was for an IP, so I can never use it for anything.
Oh,
but so that's fine. But I remember writing that scene and like coming out of my office and running into my wife's office and being like, Sarah, I figured something out. I like figured something out. And I like saw this thing I made that recontextualized everything I had made prior to that thing. And I think that my writing can be categorized into like 2 eras, and it's like before and after I wrote that scene.
Gosh, that's the best. No, dude,
And
I'm actually the same way with my songwriting. One of the last songs we wrote for the album is called Smoke Alarm. And I wrote that and I was like, this is actually it. And so I went back and I changed a bunch of lyrics and stuff because I was like, no, it needs to point to this and it needs to arrive here. It needs to. It has to. Because this is the idea. This is actually where it all should be pointing towards.
Oh man, this is the stuff.
This is the stuff.
Podcast, another podcast, just about this, dude. Oh my god,
look at this. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like expression, and it's what's cool too is I think like I was kind of giddy when I saw. Did you post your Octopath thing this morning, or was that yesterday?
It was yesterday.
Got it. I was kind of giddy when I saw that because I was working on my essay for the week and it wasn't going well. And you said something on Blue Sky about like, oh, it's cool. Like if you listen to the episode from last week, you'll see that this went through some edits and whatever. It's like that song is not finished at all.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I like a bunch of the lyrics, but there's enough there that I'm like, there's a kernel here that I like. And so if it ever comes out, if I ever work on it more or whatever, I will be interested to maybe revisit this in the way that I like to revisit old demos and go like, oh yeah, this is what that lyric used to be, or oh yeah, this is how the song structure used to be. And it's like got edited and changed and whatever to be this other thing so that it can be stronger. But it's always interesting to see where it starts.
Yeah, writing I think is such a funny thing in that regard because I know that like a lot of students and like young writers that I work with get so attached to the things that they write. And I know for me, I will say I think I'm a special case because I kind of have a reputation for being extremely unattached to I'm ready to kill. But there's always one thing that I'm like, it's really all just about getting to this. Yes. If I can get you there to that line, to this idea, to this feeling, then that is the thing that I am unwilling to budge on. And I think even with something as silly about that Octopath piece, I realized in reading it on the podcast that I wasn't quite peaking at the moment that I wanted. And so just kind of like coming back and being like, the new first sentence to that piece is Rinyu's voice is pretty annoying. Like it's like a dramatically different piece now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so what you just hit on is something that like I've been writing a lot of stuff with you for my YouTube channel where like I'll write stuff and I'll show it to you and whatever. And there's something so good about showing someone else something because I don't know about you. It's a little bit like what like apartment hunting is like where you like step into a room and the second that you step in there, you go like, no. We don't need to do the whole tour.
Yeah.
Even though it's kind of ridiculous because it's like, well, you didn't see the whole thing. It's like, no, I just know. And so like reading back something to someone else is sometimes like I started like we've been talking about I've been working on this like Metroid Prime video that I just hasn't been coming together for me. But I've been like, maybe it's okay. And then I start reading it to you, and I'm like embarrassed. I'm like, no, we're gonna see it through because that's what we're doing. But like, no. And so like. Just bringing something to someone else is just so like for me it's so helpful to just identify like this is not it. We got to get to the point to find what it is, but it's not this.
This is funny because not everybody is like this, but you and I both I think have like a performer thing with us, and there is something about that like even that tiny performance where you start clocking things in your head about like oh this isn't okay. Like my nervous system was on fire when we did that Metroid Prime 4 podcast and I was reading the like purposefully bad review script.
Yes,
because I was just thinking about there's a part of me that is like hearing it from the audience's perspective and I'm just like, oh, this is painful. Holy shit.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's that thing about the self-consciousness, not self-consciousness, but maybe self-editing where you're like, no, cut this. This has to be shorter. This is too long. Well, you know what I mean? Like that sort of stuff that goes off. And when we were doing obviously that where we were maybe intentionally working against our better judgment. of course it's gonna just like that alarm is just like, no, change this. This is bad. Wrong, like the entire time. But I think it's good to have those instincts. And I think like it can be difficult for me to present something to someone that I know in my heart of hearts isn't it, but I've tried to convince myself is.
Oh, been there. Yeah.
Because you show it to someone and they go, and this is why you show it to them and this is why you trust them. They say, like, Peter, this isn't it. And you know they're right, but you're like, fuck, but can't it be? Can't we just pretend that it is? Can't we all just pretend that this is it? It's like, no.
Dude.
It's brutal.
Honestly, that's something I think about with books all the time, where I like try to be charitable to books because I'm like, I think you really need to give a book like 35, 40 pages before you can like honestly decide you don't want to read any more of it.
Yeah.
And it's this thing where it's like you've gotta, I don't know, it's the bigger something gets, the more I think generous you almost have to be in seeing through what they want you to see through. It's almost like the I think this sounds stupid, but like, does the first sentence have to be the most compelling thing in the entire book? Like, no, because everybody that reads the first sentence will surely read the second.
Yeah.
But then when does that end? Like, when do you have to have proved it? You know what I mean? It's like such a funny thing.
So which sentence is it? Right. And it's
yeah.
like,
It's so funny.
Yeah.
During this episode, I almost reached. I was so close to doing this, and I had to abstain. But I was so close to reaching back here and pulling out when I talked about the preparedness of a text. I've got a Julian Barnes book here that has. It's definitely one of my favorite books of all time, but it also has what I think is my favorite first page in all of literature. I come back to this first page all of the time, and I'm like, no one has ever done it better. If you read this first page and you don't want to read the rest of the book, I don't know if I can be your friend. Oh my God.
I love that. Let me see what I can grab.
What's a video game with a really good first page? I said this to you the other day, maybe on a bonus pod or something, or maybe we were just gabbing, but Persona 5, I really like the...
Yeah. It's got such a good opening.
Yeah.
I think the one that most people, I think, are drawn to is like Uncharted 2. On a train. I think that's a good one.
Man, should I replay the Uncharted games?
No, they don't. No.
Really?
No. I mean, okay, I have no nostalgia for them. I played them for the first time in 2020. I played all of them back to back.
I did the same thing before Uncharted 4 came out. I played them all.
So I did that before Last of Us 2 came out because I was like, what's Naughty Dog doing? Like, I was like, what's this? Because I didn't have much background with them other than the first game. So I played all of those, and I didn't. It was one of those things where it was like, oh no.
Oh, see, I think I actually kind of liked them because they were light and breezy, and
I mean, like, they're popcorn.
And I'm not very good at like shooting games, but Uncharted was like, Jake, what if you were good at shooting games? I'm like, dun, 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 dun.
You know what's fun? In Uncharted 1, I think about this a lot.
Is that the one where you start on the boat?
Yes. So you start on the boat.
That's a good start.
And you're with Elena, the name of the love interest. It's
Bro,
you found Elena? Dude, I found Elena.
I know,
okay. Just like in the video game. There's pirates and they show up. You're like doing like underwater's like whatever, and pirates show up. And Nathan Drake hands Elena a gun. She's like a reporter, I think. And he gives her a firearm, and she's like, "Whoa, what the fuck?" And he's like, "You're gonna have to use this." And he's like, "Do you know how to use it?" And she's like, "Yeah, it's just like a camera, point and shoot." And then they move on. But like in real life, it's like, no, Elena, you're about to take a human life.
It's just like posting a picture on Instagram, dude.
Yeah,
it's like...
Elena, not even 1% is it like that. You're about to shoot like you're about to shoot a man off a little skidoo.
Can I tell you something? Not to be a crazy person, but I think for the tone of that game, I actually think that it's a good line.
That's a really really good line. It's just so silly. It's just such a silly like, yeah, point and shoot. And he's like, yeah, you got it. But it's like, no, you're about to. That person is going to be dead because of you.
I bet if we go back to it,
the
voice actor injects a little bit of unease.
Oh yeah, or kind of like sarcasm a little bit, or
point and shoot.
Sure. Those games are all right. I think Uncharted 2 stands out as like, oh, this one's got the juice.
I don't know how this happened to us, but in the back, tenth of this pod, we
welcome
went a
to
bit
essentially bonus pod 2.
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
If you're interested in this kind of conversation, then I think patreon.com/criticalerror, the bonus pod, might be for you. But I also want to say that for the person who made it this far in the podcast, who you've just been hanging out with us when we veered way off course from the proposed topic, do you want to get into the comments of this YouTube video or on Patreon and say something to us about because sometimes you and I, when we veer, it's like a different kind of content that could exist. And I wonder if when, we try to kind of stay firmly in this lane of how people talk about games and the zeitgeist and discourse and all this other stuff. And I wonder if there is a kind of content type as we expand and grow Critical Error, if there is something that this person listening is like, I would really just like to see you guys do this. Revisit this game, go back, do this in this way, whatever it is. I would just like to know. I think that the person who is still with us at this particular point in time is one of the kinds of listeners that I am almost most interested in hearing from.
I bet they've got a perspective on it.
Yes, agreed. Anything else?
Thanks for being here. That's what I got. Thanks for being here.
Until again.
Until again.